but the chat room will be open.
I'm going to go ahead and start the recording. First question was, we'll be sending these slides out after. No, what we're going to do, which I'll explain why in just a minute, but we are recording this session and we will be putting this session up on our school YouTube. So, okay, so let's go ahead and get started. While I'm talking, Megan is going to be monitoring the chat and raising hands and all that kind of stuff. And then when she's presenting, I'll do the same thing. So just some rules of engagement about how we're gonna go through this. Share airtime, raise your hand to talk, or put your questions in the chat. Try to frame questions that apply to a larger group or situation. We will pause at certain points for questions, but we want to get through some of the material first. If you have something that you would like to share or ask but are too uncomfortable to, do that publicly, you can actually chat us privately, and then we can share it anonymously with the group. We will end at 6:30 and honor that time. So if we don't get to your question or you need something answered that's really specific for your student, please email us. And this is probably the most important caveat. Please know that the information shared today is based on guidance from ODE, the Oregon Health Authority, the Governor's Office, and work with BSD leadership. The schedules we share today are not set in stone and may have revisions up to the first day of school or beyond, because we're still going to get some additional guidance from ODE and OHA. So we will focus more on the CDL schedule, which is the online only schedule, as we know that this is how the school year will start. We will give you a little bit of overview of a hybrid plan that we've been working on, but we do really want to focus on CDL since we know for sure that until November 16th, we are absolutely in distance learning. And Megan, just since I can't see you, just interrupt me. One of the foundations of what we believe in at Cedar Park is in building trust and continuing to do that. And having integrity and transparency. So and that's really our school culture as a staff is around always building trust and being transparent and doing what it takes to hold those values in place. So, and that's why this meeting was really important for us to have. I'm sorry that we had to postpone it. And I'm glad that we are able to do it tonight, and we will continue to have more as we go forward, because we're at least getting some plans in place. So we are going to talk about, what does comprehensive distance learning look like? What are the expectations for teaching and learning as we start the new school year? Some schedules for students, both a CDL and a hybrid. And then what are some of the things that we need to happen at home to better support students in a distance learning? And then also, what are some of the things that we're going to do differently?
Shannon, can I interrupt you for just a minute?
Absolutely.
Things that we forgot to mention, and we've learned when we've got a lot of people who are logged on for Zoom sessions, is that and this hasn't started happening yet, but the questions can start coming much faster than we're able to track or keep up with them. So if you guys could do us a favor and hold off on any questions until we get to the end, to make sure that it's not something that's already going to be covered, it'll help us organize our responses, and we'll be able to get to more of the questions that way.
Yes. Thank you. So, as we've been working this summer endlessly, I just want to clarify that our lens, as well as like ODE and OHA and all of it, is in creating schedules and developing plans, is really around safety for students and staff. Also making sure that we are being equitable in our decisions so that our most impacted students really have the support they need, obviously as well as every other student, but but that is something that is at the forefront of our decisions. And that we value consistency, not only as instructors, but also because that's what our kids need. And so we are developing consistency in our instructional delivery, our learning platform, and in our teacher-student interaction. I'm just gonna say right now, like, we know that the spring was terrible. It was a nightmare. It was a reaction to an emergency situation. Teachers had to go from doing what they've done their entire career to being flipped upside down on their heads, and we were also given very strict guidance around not giving grades, how many lessons can we post a week, not doing synchronous stuff. So I just want to acknowledge that we know that we did not feel successful as far as our standards for rigor and learning in the spring, and the fall is going to look very different. So one of the most important things that we know, especially at middle school, is that kids need to develop relationships with teachers. Generally, students don't show up to school, and as you know with your students, if they don't like their teachers, or they don't feel connected, or they don't have a relationship, it is that much harder for them to engage in work and learning. So teachers will spend a significant amount of time building relationships with students at the beginning of the year, and also helping them to connect and get to know each other in their cohorts, which I'll talk a little bit about cohorts in a minute. We know that we need to do weekly and daily cell work, which is social emotional learning, and that is not only a priority laid out by ODE, but that is a priority for our school that we've been working on for a while. And so we are including in our plans ways to do that. We know that we need rigor, and rigor is something that Cedar Park, as an MYP school, has always had at our core. So it's very, very important to us that our students have rigor, and we are building that into what the fall looks like. Students need a schedule. They need a routine. We heard that from so many parents, and we know that, but we heard that a lot from parents in our listening sessions. Students need accountability, which looks like grades, and obviously that is absolutely going to happen. And then very importantly, parents need to have access and transparency in the learning, because it's not a traditional kind of setting where you can say, hey, come sit down at the kitchen table and open up your Avid notebook and show me what you did today at school, or show me your planner. We need to be able to give you the tools and the learning so that you can access what's going on with your student. Okay, so a few terms that I think will really help you, because educators love acronyms. So CDL stands for Comprehensive Distance Learning, and that's off-site or remote learning full-time. A hybrid is learning that blends on-site and at-home sessions. Synchronous is learning in which participants interact at the same time and in the same space. Oftentimes that is, so this is an example of synchronous. A synchronous session. Asynchronous is learning that occurs in time, in an elapsed time between two or more people. It could be email, online discussion forums, message boards, whatever. So what is a cohort? And you're going to hear this term a lot. We have a couple of different cohorts that we will be talking about and working with. A cohort is essentially a group of students who exist together, either physically, online, or both. So we will have attendance cohorts, and those are students who attend school in person on the same days if we are in hybrid. And then we have learning cohorts, which are smaller groups, and those are students that are on the same kind of academic team and who are in the same classes. Megan, do you want to add anything to cohorts?
No, that was great.
Okay. And Megan will talk more about cohorts and how that's happening. I know parents have a lot of question around how kids get on a cohort. Can we be on the same cohort as our neighbor? All that kind of stuff. That's, I think, great questions, and we will get to those. by the way, these definitions are provided by ODE. So really focus on the bold, but teacher facilitated learning. So that is synchronous, either on site, so if students are in person, or off site, or an asynchronous learning experience planned by the guided licensed teacher. We think about synchronous learning, just like I already said, as in teachers are delivering a lesson and interacting with students, okay? It's when all students, we want them to have a common experience related to specific learning targets. This is what we lacked in the spring, okay? Synchronous opportunities are provided daily and may include full group instruction, peer interaction, two-way communication, small group breakouts. There's a lot of variety there. And so synchronous learning will happen in distance learning in the fall. And it will happen even if we go to hybrid. So we'll get there. Applied learning is what ODE basically is independent time, independent work, although teachers are still available to students, but it is time where they are working on things independent of adult support. They can email a question or something like that if they have it, but it's not a session where teachers are talking to and interacting with students. Okay, so there's a lot. There's no way I'm giving you all that's outlined in the ODE safe schools, ready students, or ready schools, safe students. Anyway, I invite you to go onto the ODE website and read that document. It's lengthy, but much more detailed than when I have time to give you here. So the expectations, just briefly, for teaching and learning for students grades 4 through 8 is that teacher facilitated learning will be approximately 50% of the learning time, which for a day means 2 hours and 30 minutes or 12 hours and 30 minutes per week. Now that is the required minimum. Beaverton hasn't laid out specific requirements yet with the teachers. That's still being worked on, but we go beyond the required minimum in general. So just know, teacher facilitated learning, this is the amount of time. Applied learning cannot make up more than 50% of the time, and there is no required minimum. So it is built into the schedules, but I know that a lot of parents were really wanting teachers to have that facilitated synchronous learning. We are also required to have 2 hours daily of time worked in dedicated to nutrition and wellness. So that's snacks, that's lunch, that's connection, time management, planning, things like that. And that also looks like social emotional learning. So sessions with teachers and advisories talking about social emotional wellness. Students will earn grades, and I am happy to say, you have been requesting this for years, all of our teachers will be using Canvas. And in fact, as a school, we will be developing a platform that looks the same for everyone. So you will know that every teacher is putting their lessons under the modules or under this. So we will have a group of teachers that comes together and kind of develops a template for what the Canvas landing page needs to look like and how teachers will use it. So that will develop consistency for you and for students. Okay, Megan, do you?
Yeah, let me share my screen.
Okay.
All right. So as Shannon mentioned, the schedules that we're going to go over with you are a draft based on our best thinking at this point in time. And, you know, additional guidance will be coming out from ODE and from the district. And so we'll make changes as we need to over time. But when we're looking at comprehensive distance learning, CDL, we're going to be starting that September 14th. The reason for the additional week is because this is like such a steep learning curve for everybody, and the teachers are going to need some additional time for professional development, and we need to have a really strong start, and we know that. We spent a lot of time listening to parents, listening to students, and listening to teachers in the fall. There was a lot of overlap regarding what we heard from everybody. And just to echo what Shannon said, we know that there's a need for more rigorous instruction. We know that students need routine, they need structure, they need some accountability, and that kind of a thing. And we also need to plan everything around keeping students safe during the pandemic. And then, of course, the social and emotional connections. Middle school in particular is such an important, awkward time for students anyway, so we know that that's really got to be a priority. So this is an example of a 6th grade schedule. I have a 7th and 8th grade built. The only difference between the schedules is really the time of day that they have their core classes and their elective classes. Otherwise, it's pretty similar. But the day for the teachers would start at the same time that it always has. So there would be some preparation time for them before school, some professional development, collaboration time, that kind of a thing. And then students in 6th grade would log on at 9:15. They would have a synchronous session with their first elective teacher. And then they would continue to work asynchronously from 9:30 to 10 o'clock. We use that term asynchronous in really a couple of different ways. So it might not be the same time and space, but for the CDL model, we will have the teachers logged on for that time where it says asynchronous, not the whole time for the elective teachers, but we will for the core teachers. And that way they can work small group of students. And as students are getting started on an assignment, they'll be available to ask questions. Just like if the students were in a classroom and they had some independent work time, the teacher would be present. So, as needed for that. Students would then go to their second elective class, and that would look similar. One of the differences this upcoming year is we've had every other day electives. So during 2 periods, students would have a total of 4 electives, 2 on one day, 2 on the other day. And we also heard from everybody that it was felt a little bit too much with all of the elective classes, and because of having to keep cohorts small when we go back to school, the students will have 2 elective classes. So there are some weird nuances in the schedule where some of your kids may end up with a 3rd elective just because of the having to keep the cohort sizes as they are, but they'll still have two periods a day. The elective classes will run for a semester, and then they'll have separate, different electives to some degree the second semester. Students will have 3 core classes. That's their science, their humanities, and their math, and they will have an advisory. There will be some students who will have an additional class. If your student has an IEP through the resource room with a learning specialist, then there's going to be an additional support period built in for those students. AVID is going to be an additional class if your student is in AVID, and with ESL, we'll have some time built in for additional support. So a 6th grader would be logged in from 9:15 to 9:30, possibly longer, depending on if they needed help and if there was small group work going on. Same thing with their second elective, and then they would go to their first core class. So we do expect we want students to have routine and structure, and we want this to mirror what would potentially happen with a hybrid schedule as closely as possible to help with a smooth transition at that point in time. So when a student has an art class first period during the day, we want them to be engaged in art for 45 minutes, even though they're not going to be necessarily online that whole time or Zooming that whole time. That's their art class. So we would want them to be engaged in that. And that's going to be true with all of their classes. There will be some kind of a mechanism for taking attendance. We don't know exactly what that will look like yet, but we're hoping that we'll be able to let parents know if a student didn't show up to a class. But with that said, we also know that there will be times where a student might not be able to access the synchronous lessons in real time. So they will be available beyond that, and there's not going to be a consequence if they have to do their work at a different time, but we do want to make sure that we're keeping track of kids and that we know that they're engaged and that they're doing their work and that kind of a thing. So students will receive letter grades, as Shannon had already mentioned, and also the common platform and having it look similar from class to class. So for a sixth grader, after their first core class, they would go to lunch or have lunch, and then they would have advisory. So advisory is really a time for social interaction. It's not an academic time. It's really about social emotional learning, growth and development, and just time to connect, time to see other kids, time to interact with other kids, and that kind of a thing. So during our advisory, 1 to 2 times a month, there will be web activities. And if you're not familiar with that, we've got a group of 8th graders who try out for a web program in 8th grade, and that still happened all remotely last spring. And then they are selected to work with groups of 6th graders. So it's really a way for older kids to mentor younger kids, and there's a whole curriculum and a ton of really, really fun activities that go along with that. So that will happen 1 to 2 times a month. And then we also are going to provide Second Steps curriculum, which is a social emotional curriculum, and the district is putting together some social emotional learning curriculum as well. And then the teachers have said, you know, we really want to be able to use some of that to have team time so that kids get a chance to interact with kids that they might not be seeing otherwise that are on their team. And so there will be some team time that happens then as well. So 12:40 to 2:10, students would have some time for independent reading. It might be a choice book, or it might be something assigned by a humanities teacher or a science teacher. And exactly what that orange block of time looks like, the teams will provide a little bit more guidance, but it'll be some amount of reading. And then the rest of that is time for applied learning. So if they have things that they need to get caught up in on their homework, if they need to email their teachers, or if they have a question that they didn't happen to think of during class and they want to reach out to their teacher, that would be a time to do that. And then also just for wellness. So there's a chunk of time in the day where if you want to check in with your child, you want to go for a walk, you want them to go for a walk, you want to do it together, there's some time built in for that. That is also, and it's a long chunk of time. It's 90 minutes. So part of that time will also be a chance for students that have an IEP to work with their case managers on their IEP goals, and for the students that are in AVID to connect with their AVID teachers. And then students would go on and they would have their Core 2 and their Core 3 class. So because we need to keep the groups of students small when we go to a hybrid model, we really need to be thinking through all of that now, even though that is down the road, because we don't want students to be in a situation where they would have to change teams or change teachers or get to know a whole bunch of new students or that kind of a thing. So we are going to be working through all of the cohorting, not going to be working through, are working through now. Because we do need to keep cohorts of students small, students will be placed in cohorts with students that have similar preferred electives as they do, so that we can really try to keep everybody safe and minimize any contact as much as we possibly can. The district is also looking at students that are in households. And so if you have students living in your household and you've updated everything in Parent View and your online registration, the district is running reports, and they will automatically put students that are at or families that have students at multiple schools in the same attendance cohort days. So if your student is assigned to a Monday, Tuesday cohort day, and it'll be Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday when we go hybrid, then all of the other kids that live in your household would also be assigned to that same day. For a lot of people, that might be great. There might be circumstances where that might feel like a disaster. That's important for us to know if there would be issues with having your kids in the same attendance grouping. As far as choice around the learning cohorts or the attendance cohorts, there will be a process that will be coming out if you are assigned to an attendance cohort and that's presenting a hardship for you in some way. There will be a way for you to communicate that with the school. The district is going to be putting together a plan for that, and we don't have that in place yet, but there will be some way for you to apply for a change in attendance cohort. As far as the learning cohorts go, or the team of teachers that students are on, there is not a ton of flexibility because of having to keep each group to the same size and keep it small, and because it is connected to their electives. So there isn't quite as much flexibility with the learning cohorts. There might be a little bit, but there's not a ton. So any questions about the CDL schedule? And Shannon, if there's questions popping up, will you read them for the video?
Yeah, I will. I've been kind of typing some answers to some of the questions. So, and remember, this is a sample schedule for 6th grade. 7th grade has their, electives in the middle of the day. 8th grade has them towards the end. So as far as like synchronous time and asynchronous time and all of that, it looks the same. It just happens at different times during the day. Megan, there's a question about if kids chose electives in the spring, are they going to remain the same for fall?
Yes. To the extent that I can honor that. So we've got, we've got about 900 students. We had 7 different options for electives on there. Rather than having 4, we're now looking students having 2 electives. So I'm going through every single individual student request and trying to make sure that they get into one of their top 2 elective choices. It is a slow, laborious process, but yeah, they will. That's partway. We're a good chunk of the way into that, and they would have the same thing that they had opted for in the spring, if we're still able to offer it.
So a question about how many kids will be in a cohort. For the attendance cohort, that's about roughly half the school, so 450-ish. And then for a cohort of learning at school, which will be the same if they're at home, because of the room restrictions and that we have to have 35 square feet of space per person in a classroom, that really dictates how many kids we can have in a cohort. And we're looking at 17. So students they'll be in groups of 17 if we are ever at school. If for CDL, so we have to build it that way so that we're ready to go to school if that happens. And so Megan, are their cohorts going to be the 34?
Yeah. So what'll happen during CDL is that everybody who has a Core 1 science class will be in the same CDL section, and then when we go to a hybrid model, half of those kids would be in the Monday to Tuesday cohort, attendance cohort, and then the other half would be in the Thursday, Friday cohort.
Yes. So and this kind of has come up a little bit around flexibility and can students attend online only? We are really trying to make that happen so that if you wanted your student to stay attached to Cedar Park, and we moved to hybrid and you wanted them to stay in CDL, can we do that? And the answer is yes, we are trying to do that. Their experience is going to look a little bit different, and so that'll make sense in a minute. We understand that families and communities want to try and work together, whether it comes to student supervision or getting kids together to work. So there's going to be some natural groupings that happen with the electives, but ODE is very, very firm that we have heterogeneous cohorts. We cannot have a cohort that is like all our ELL kids and all our IEP, or all the band kids are in one cohort. We are not allowed that. We specifically cannot do that, but we do want to find a way to gather input so that, if you and your neighbor are trying to work together for childcare and whatever, we want to be sensitive and supportive of that. And we're not sure about, the electives. We currently have a half-time Spanish slot sitting there hoping to hire for that and incorporate that. As far as what band and choir and all of that looks like, we are waiting for guidance from the district because we need to be consistent across all the middle schools. And I think they are also waiting for some guidance from the Oregon Health Authority.
So there's a couple other questions coming up too.
Could you scroll down? One person requested to see, oh wait, nope, you're right. They wanted to see the core one part again. I'm sorry, Megan.
That's okay. So there's a question about students choosing a cohort. So no, students won't be choosing their learning cohort, but they chose their electives. And so to the extent that I can, with the constraints around the ODE guidelines, their elective request is driving some of that. And we also will have heterogeneous groupings. And so, so cohorts will look similar across the board in terms of makeup of students and gender and all that kind of stuff. So somebody asked about the attendance versus the learning cohort, and to review that a little bit. So an attendance cohort will be which days students come to school when we go to a hybrid model. An attendance cohort means you're in a Monday, Tuesday attendance cohort, and that's when your child is physically at school, or you're in a Thursday, Friday cohort and your child's physically at school. A learning cohort will be when they are at school in a hybrid model, that would be the students that they are with throughout the day to minimize exposure to large numbers of students. And there's some guideline in the ODE thing around, how many students you can have in a room and how many students they can potentially be exposed to by being exposed to different classes and that kind of a thing. So I think that's it on that part. Oh, there's a question about Core Plus classes work.
Oh yeah.
That is still a big question. We don't know how that's going to work yet. So that will be to be continued. And there is not a link to the schedule. We're going to post the video up, but the schedule is a draft schedule. And, if we don't want to publish it out there as like the schedule that we're going to have, because it's entirely possible that there will be some changes to it. Hopefully not a lot, but there may be. When students are in the building, will teachers move around or will the students move around? So the teachers will be moving, except for elective. Students will be able to get up and go to an elective class, but the teachers for the core classes will actually be moving to the rooms. And then questions about PE. There will be PE. That's folded in as one of the elective periods. And then there's questions about band. I don't see how a band teacher can teach a kid to play an instrument via online. We're still trying to sort through questions around band and wearing a mask and how do you play that with a mask on.
Kids are required to wear a mask. How do they play an instrument? And so we're waiting for guidance from, district office and probably OHA to address those kinds of things. So do you want to spend just a few minutes on hybrid, but not too long? Because my gosh, it's already 6:06.
Yeah. So remember, the schedule that we're going to go over now is if and when we're back in a hybrid model, because we've met the metrics that the governor has set forward in order for that to happen. So when we're in hybrid, when a sixth grader comes to school, their day in terms of the classes that they go to in the rotation will be very similar to how it was last year, and that's true for 7th and 8th grade as well. There will be safety things that are in place, and we're not going to spend a lot of time going around that now, but students will come in. They won't have access to lockers. They'll keep things in their the classroom that they're in for their core classes, and there won't be large groups congregating in the hallway. So we'll work with students to help them understand that when they come in, they go straight to their first period class. It's a chance to connect a little bit more socially with the students that are in their learning cohort and with their teacher. So a sixth grader would go to their first 2 elective classes in the morning. They would have a core class, lunch, and then 2 core classes. That's the in-person, I'm at school, I'm in a hybrid schedule. That's what a sixth grader's day would look like. So if this is their day on Monday and Tuesday, because they're in a Monday, Tuesday attendance cohort, then on Thursday and Friday, they would have a remote schedule. So their distance learning on Thursday and Friday, with the times would be a little bit different because their teachers need to do the remote classes when the in-person students are at their elective classes so that they're not happening at the same time. So a sixth grader would have, if they have science period, their core 1 or their core 2, they would log into that at 9 o'clock. If they're in humanities core 2, then that group would log in at 9 o'clock. All of the sixth graders will have one of those 2 classes, and they don't overlap, so they'll be able to log in to all 3 and participate in all 3 of their classes remotely. They would have lunch. They would have that independent reading time for applied learning, time for wellness, and then they would have elective classes in the afternoon, which would be all asynchronous because our elective teachers have students during the entire day. So there would be some kind of asynchronous option or applied learning option for them on their remote days. School will start at 10 o'clock so that the teachers have time to start with the remote lessons at 9 o'clock. So the in-person time is a little bit later start time than the remote day for students.
So I want to just pop in here because there's a lot of questions about, can students stay CDL if we move to hybrid? The answer is yes, but their experience is going to be a little different because while the teacher is teaching the students that are actually in person, they're not available to be interacting with the students that are CDL. So that's why we scheduled specific remote time. So if your student is CDL only, basically your student would be following the remote schedule all the time. Okay, they would still have synchronous time with their teachers, but they would only have opportunities to interact with other students who are CDL only. They wouldn't be like on Zoom while the teacher is teaching in the classroom. That is a classroom management nightmare. So,
but one of the things that that I do think is important for you guys to be aware of is that the new instruction, so new teaching, new information, new instruction will all be provided remotely. So their time when they're in school with a hybrid model is really to support what they've been taught remotely. So they're not going to be missing out on direct instruction if they choose to stay in a CDL schedule all year, but they will miss out on those opportunities where the teacher might go, a lot of kids don't seem to understand this concept, so they might reteach during that time, or they might have some small group work or be available to answer questions. But the in-person time will be to reinforce what's been taught remotely. If your child stays CDL the whole year, there's going to be a little bit of overlap in what happens on the remote day on a Monday and a Thursday, possibly. So, which is fine. They can still log in and be involved in both of those classes so that they're in a remote environment Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. But there might be a little bit of overlap. And then on Wednesday, we're still waiting on guidance from the district around what Wednesday will look like. That's why there's a Wednesday with a question mark in there.
Can we go, as far as like how kids get cohorted on all of that, I don't want you to think that the students are going to be cohorted only by elective. Like we don't want that, because that automatically also creates demographic homogeneous grouping, and we can't do that. So it's not like all the art kids are going to be together all the time. No, that's not how it will work. Am I right on? Am I addressing that correctly, Megan?
Yeah, well, each elective teacher will teach a class, 2 classes first semester to a group of students and 2 classes second semester. So there's multiple places where every single one of the electives falls. And then we have the bulk of our students request art as a first or second choice, and we have 2 art teachers. So there's actually even a lot more sections of art. So so as far as the learning cohort goes, that's a part of it. But we also are looking at balancing, balancing for gender, balancing for diversity and language needs and learning styles and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of care is taken in that. And then as far as the attendance cohorts go, we're looking at families that have students across multiple levels being assigned to the same attendance cohort, and keeping things balanced as well. So there's multiple layers to how students are being and why they're being assigned to different cohorts.
Okay, so can I share screen and continue on with our,
Yeah.
okay, thank you for that, Megan. Know that we will continue to have more sessions, information sessions, and sessions for you to ask questions. To be honest, I've been frustrated that we have not been allowed to do that before. So that is definitely a priority for us. We got some feedback this morning about specifically addressing like what is CDL at Cedar Park going to look like versus what does Flex look like? And I think this is a great question. It's something important to address. So I have just a couple of things here. We are offering an online only educational experience, and so is Flex. Flex is using curriculum and materials called Apex. And I will tell you that our teachers all have access to Apex, and in addition to their other curriculum, and many of our math teachers actually used Apex. I anticipate that our teachers will use Apex more than they had in the spring because they were just trying to keep afloat. Students who enroll in Flex are making a semester commitment, and that means like if we were to go hybrid in November and you want your student to physically attend Cedar Park, you are there until the end of the semester. We are able to allow a student who maybe needs to quarantine for 4 weeks to go CDL and then come back to school when they're ready and they feel safe. So we have some flexibility there. We have obviously in-person options for our hybrid if we get to go there, and Flex does not allow that. I will say, obviously Cedar Park CDL is taught by our CPMS teachers. And I list that as a bragging point because as many of you know that I talked about so much in spring when we got demographics and data last year. Cedar Park has the highest growth in math of all like middle schools in the state. And we have the second highest growth in language arts in the state comparing all like middle schools. Our teachers are excellent. I also want to point out that there is no magical online teacher farm putting out online teachers. The teachers that will be working at Flex are teachers that will be coming from BSD schools. And they will have just as much experience teaching online as any other teacher. So just know that. We are still an MYP school. We'll be using our MYP criterion, our MYP assessments. Your kids at Cedar Park will have connections to their neighborhood community and their friends that live in the area. Flex students will be coming from all around the district. So we will have daily synchronous lessons, and I am assuming that they will also have daily synchronous lessons, but I don't know what that looks like and what is the length and how much time. We are going to focus on CEL and having synchronous socialization for our students. And obviously there's that opportunity if we go hybrid or we end up hopefully going back full time. That's not necessarily something that's going to happen in the same way as Flex, right? They would have to do it only synchronously. We have web for our 6th grade support, and that's really important. It's something that we love and is really important to integrating sixth graders into Cedar Park and learning the culture. We have purchased the online program, and our teachers who run web have actually been getting trained, and they are prepared to have web, our 8th grade leaders, connect with 6th graders actually more often than we had an opportunity in person. We are figuring out a way to utilize our library and check out books and utilize our classroom libraries. And we also know that our students who are on Cedar Park CDL will have a connection to their future high school and be able to reap the rewards of that. I will say that both online sessions require more parental support, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And I'm sure you kind of, in reflecting on what it was like for your student in the spring and how it could be frustrating and you had to spend maybe more time nudging and prodding and checking up, that's going to be the reality whether you're at Cedar Park CDL or Flex. So in talking about what are those supports and thinking about, not only am I a parent, but I have talked to parents about their frustrations and struggles and all of that, how are we going to make this work? Well, first of all, we're going to need to be partners with you much, much more closely than we ever have. So thinking about a school family home partnership is going to be really important. At home, it's really important that you create a learning space for your student. If you work from home, you understand how important it is that you have that space where you can focus. So think about that. Setting a schedule and following it for your student. We heard a lot from parents that they needed a schedule and they wanted to be able to say, no, you're supposed to be doing your math right now. No, you're supposed to be doing humanities right now. And so we're trying to give you those tools. In that, then honor the routines. Kids need routines. They need to know what to expect, and there's so much happening right now in their lives that is unpredictable and different. And so the more that we can honor routines and develop those, the better. Questions about school supplies. I will address this more later as we get closer, and I work with some teachers on what their thoughts are around that. But I would say right now, in thinking about school supplies, like, keep it simple, and the more normal you can make it feel and look for a student to have to engage with learning and school, the better. So spirals, yes. Pens and pencils, absolutely. So I would say have some conversations with your student about how they like to work. Some kids like handwriting out their essays because they don't like typing on a computer. And so can you then take a picture of that and submit it to Canvas that way instead of having the student having to type it out? So we'll have those conversations with teachers, and they'll be communicating that stuff. I would say commit to engage 150% the first 2 weeks of school, because that's when we're going to be doing the heavy lifting of learning how to be online students. And the more that you can sit alongside and be a part of that experience and know how to use Canvas and know how to access all of the things that your student is accessing, the more comfortable and I guess the better you're going to be set up for success for the rest of the year. So, and those first 2 weeks are going to look a lot like team building, getting to know each other, getting to know the teacher, getting to know how to use Canvas, all of that stuff, even for the 8th graders. So I can also say learn Canvas. As a parent, there are some videos and lessons on the district website to teach you how to do that, but they are developing more and we'll have those. Obviously, if you're a 6th grade parent, you don't have access to that yet, although you can go watch the videos and do some lessons. You just can't necessarily log into a Canvas page. Communication is going to be really important. Kids don't know, as you know, they don't know how to necessarily talk to their teacher in an online environment. They don't know how to use email and ask questions. So we're going to have to be very explicit about teaching our students how to ask for help in this environment. They're not sitting in a room where they can just raise their hand or go work with the teacher during their lunch period or something like that. We're gonna have to do things differently. Communicate with teachers when things aren't working, or you have questions, or all of it. So we're gonna be expecting our teachers to communicate much more frequently with home. If your student is struggling, and your family needs support, we have 3 counselors this year, and they are there to help support you and help support kids. And then, of course, reach out to us if you're not seeing the rigor, if you're not seeing the engagement. We need to know. We will be attending synchronous lessons. We'll be popping into some of those cell lessons. We'll be on all the teacher Canvas pages, but when you're needing support, you're the first line to let us know if there's something going on that we need to support our teachers with. And then finally, I think it's important. Sorry.
Sorry, when you're at a breaking point before you go on to the last bullet point, can I address a couple of questions?
Go ahead.
Okay. So few questions, a couple around the schedule. So the CDL schedule is a Monday through Friday schedule. Wednesday, and exactly what Wednesday will look like is up in the air. Their students will be engaged in learning 5 days a week. We just don't know exactly how Wednesday is going to look yet, so that will be coming. There was a question about if a lot of students sign up for Flex, will Cedar Park lose teachers to Flex? The answer to that is yes. The number of teachers follow the number of students. And the follow-up question was, if those students come back at the semester, would we get those teachers back? And it would, if there was a large number of students, maybe, probably not super likely, but maybe. And Canvas, every single teacher will use Canvas. The format will look similar from class to class. And there was a question about volunteering. I love our parent community. We just have such a great community. Asking about, is there a way to volunteer and help teachers? Even when we go to the hybrid model, we will not be allowed to let volunteers into the building, which is just such a bummer, because so many of you like to be engaged and helping. We don't know if there will be other ways for you to support the teachers and to volunteer and help, but thank you for asking, and we hope that there will be a way to do that. We just don't have any idea yet what that would look like. And then lastly, there was a question about students that have IEPs, and I responded a little bit in the text to it. But under the hybrid model, at this point in time, the thinking is that students that have an IEP and are served through a learning strategies class, so not if your child is in a specialized program, the days that they come to school will look different than the rest of the school. They'll have a little additional time. If your student is in a learning strategies class, then they will probably come on Wednesday, once we're in a hybrid model, for their specially designed instruction time with their case manager. And under the comprehensive distance learning schedule, there's some time built in where they will have time with their case manager, and the case managers will be pushing into the core classes and able to work with small groups of students in the core classes virtually as well. So few different layers of things going on. If you have specific questions about your student and how that might look, feel free to shoot me an email. And then if there's a process of revising an IEP before school's closed, how and when will that process resume? We know it will resume. We don't know what that will look like quite yet. I know that we were holding IEP meetings and doing some of that virtually, but because there's some assessing that goes along sometimes with revising an IEP or going through an evaluation process, we're not sure about that yet with the social distancing and everything. So we will let you know, and reach out to us, reach out to the counselors if you have questions about your specific child. Shannon, there's a question about an estimate of the number of CPMS students electing to go to Flex.
Last week it was 25. I know that it's more. I'm going to be getting the list of students and reaching out to every family and hopefully answering questions. And getting them to stay at Cedar Park, because as far as I'm concerned, we're the best middle school in Oregon, and we want our kids to stay with us. So, So, finally, building a community. We are sensitive to the fact that you have been kind of pod quarantining with your neighbors and your students' friends. And we want to be as sensitive and supportive of that when in creating cohorts and things like that. But it's important that kids have academic support, and our teachers do a great job collaborating. And so even if they don't have the same math teacher, those math teachers really work together. And so hopefully your quarantine pods, what's going on with the thing? Do you see those, Megan? The lines on the screen?
I do. I don't know.
Am I being Zoom bombed? Anyway,
I don't know.
also having supervision and sharing socialization. I did put this in because there were several questions this morning, and it also came up today as far as the metrics for hybrid to happen. I can't stress enough that it is not our choice if we go to hybrid. It is not our choice if we go all back in person. It is not our choice to do CDL. The county metrics the metrics came out from the governor's office, and I just wanted to give you a little summary here. On the left, these metrics need to be met 3 weeks in a row for us to consider going to a hybrid model. We need to have less than 10 cases per 100,000 in the preceding days. So if you look over to the right, the Washington County metrics as of I think probably technically July 26th, but I just looked it up today, we had 44 cases per 10,000. So we need to get below 10 cases per 100,000. And then we also have to have test positivity below 5%. Well, test positivity in June was 4.5, and as of July 26th, it's 7.0. Then we also have to meet state metrics, which is test positivity below 5%. And it was 6.6 in June and 6.5. It actually had gone all the way up to, I believe, 8 a week or so ago. So those are the things that guide us, and it is OHA that really is in charge of those kinds of decisions, whether we shut down, whether we go back, those kinds of things. Okay, so.
There's a question about the metric requirements. They're not metric requirements for CPMS. They're metric requirements that are set by the governor and then outlined in where I think it's in the ODE. I know it was in her press release, but
there are some exceptions for rural counties, and you can go to ODE and find more details on those metrics. But there are some exceptions for schools that have students that come from several different counties. That doesn't apply to Beaverton, or rural counties. And there was a question earlier about, so if we go to hybrid, why can't, like we just have everybody at school one day? And because we would still have to social distance, again, there's that requirement of 35 square feet per person, which means based on Cedar Park's kind of layout and classrooms, is around 17 in a room for the average classroom. Is CPMS kind of at the mercy of Washington County numbers, or smaller, or I believe it's Washington County. I believe. So. What time is it? We did start a little bit later. Any other questions? We really appreciate you attending tonight. I know that you have been wanting information for a while. And I'm sorry it has been so slow coming. We will do better. We will share more. we will have more to continue sharing. So that's also part of it. So we're so lucky to have such a wonderful, supportive community, and parents who are involved and care about what's going on. And it's important for us that we listen to your voices and take your feedback and consider all of that when we're making some decisions. And if you have any questions about CDL and Flex, and what it's going to look like, please reach out to us. That's what we're here for, and we want your students to be successful. It's a really hard time to be a student. It's hard always to be in middle school, and this is just making it harder. So we are going to do our best and do better. So Megan, anything you want to say?
Thank you everybody for coming. And I'm just kind of thinking through one other piece, and I was reading and writing stuff down at the same time, so I don't know if we mentioned this. Sorry, that's my dog. The joy of Zoom. But if you did sign up for Flex and you decide not to, I know they've had a huge influx of applications. You are welcome to email Shannon or I if you decide not to do Flex, to let us know, and we'll communicate with the Flex program to make sure that your child gets into the right cohort for their elective choice and all that kind of stuff. So that was it. Thank you so much for being here and for all of your positive comments and your support. We just really appreciate the partnership that we have with you guys. So thank you.
Okay. Have a nice evening, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.